So just wanted to say welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us tonight for the Gout Support Group of America's Facebook Live. This week or this quarter, I guess, we are going to be talking about everything you need to know about clinical trials. So if you've joined us before on one of our Facebook Lives that we try to have at least every other month, we like to start out with different themes. And this theme is all about clinical trials. And we see a lot of different posts on the support group, and we take the feedback from those posts to create content for you all that we think would be most conducive to the conversation. And so again, tonight we're here joined by Dr. Christopher Parker and Gary Ho, the co-founders of Gout Support Group of America. My name is Kimberly Sirota, and I have been working with Gary and Dr. Parker for a little over a year now with the Gout Support Group of America. I'm really excited to be here. So we're going to go ahead and kind of jump right into this tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and get started and just turn it over to Dr. Parker and ask you these three top questions that we are really hearing about. What are clinical trials? Who can participate? How can I participate?
Yeah. So I'm going to do the first one first, and you might have to ask me the other ones again so that I don't forget them. But what is a clinical trial? Well, a clinical trial, there's a couple different kinds, but the most common is when a new medication has gone from theory to maybe real life to animal studies, and then a small group of humans. And then that's all kind of in the very early stages. And then they start listing the trials as either phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And phase 3 is where most people get involved in clinic. And what that is where it looks like this medicine really works, and there's going to be a large randomized trial, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, oftentimes against a placebo, but sometimes not, where they really want to find out how well it works. Is it really going to work better than the other medicines that we have on the market today? And naturally, we want to understand the safety profile. So we will, every complaint or issue that somebody has along the way, they're written down and quantitated in fantastic detail, so that by the end of the trial, when all the data is going to get submitted to the FDA for approval, they can clearly show that this medicine is statistically better than whatever they're comparing to, whether it's placebo or some other medicine, and what that safety profile is. So that's really a clinical trial. Every so often, there are studies done where the medicine is already FDA approved, and they're trying to answer a different question with it, or they're looking at it in a different disease or condition. And so again, it's an FDA approved medicine already, but they're trying to answer different questions. And then, yeah, that's really the main two. Oh, and then you asked the other question, sorry. The other questions was, how do I participate?
Yes, and who can join?
And who can join? So I'm going to do the second one next because it's going to get me right to the third question. Who can participate? So there's a couple different ways where patients can potentially be candidates for a trial. One is if you're seeing a doctor who either knows of a clinical trial or is actually doing a clinical trial, and they think that perhaps you would be a good candidate, they may mention it to you and say, hey, have you ever thought about being in a clinical trial? And if so, or if not, they share some information with you, and then you can contemplate whether or not you want to participate. Another one is where whatever doctor or doctors you're seeing, they're not referring you or mentioning it. You find out proactively yourself if there's a clinical trial going on. In this case, would probably be gout, because that's why you guys are listening. So say a gout study that's being done in your area, whether it's your city or general vicinity, and then you seek them out because there's a phone number, point of contact, an email or whatever, where you would just reach out and say like, hey, I'm interested. I know you're doing a gout study, a clinical trial. How do I find out if I'm a candidate? Which really gets me to the third one, because even if a doctor refers you, that doesn't necessarily mean you're definitely in. Clinical trials are really designed to answer very specific questions. Therefore, they oftentimes have very strict criteria about how the diagnosis was made, like in this case, gout. Are we certain that it's gout and not some lookalike disorder? And how sick are you? So depending on the trial, you could either have very bad gout, or they're like, no, we're not taking severe, we're taking only mild to moderate. And then the other part is how sick are you with other problems? So if somebody has, say, a really unstable heart disorder, or they're currently undergoing chemotherapy for cancer or something like that, they're probably going to say, well, you clearly have gout, but you got these other problems that seems to us are so important and prioritized right now that you're really not a good study candidate. We'll keep you in mind for the future, but they really have these strict criteria to help you know if you're a candidate.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker.
Sure.
And what I think is really exciting about this, again, for anyone who hasn't joined one of our events before or doesn't know the whole story about Chris or Dr. Parker and Gary is Dr. Parker's patient, and they have known each other for a very long time. And you don't get this very often. And I think one of the greatest insights that we have is their story together about Gary's journey with gout and his experience with a clinical trial. And so I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gary, because Gary really has the best insight here. For anyone here that is considering enrolling in a clinical trial, Gary's been through it. He's a patient, had uncontrolled gout for a real long time, finally found a rheumatologist that helped him, and then finally got into this clinical trial. So Gary, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and let's hear your story.
Awesome. Let me make sure my mute is off. Perfect. Thank you, Kimberly. I am so excited to be here. And you guys, don't you love our new platform? Huh? Comparing it to the last one, I think we were like wide by, 5 inches in the face. Right. It was awesome. But I am so happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing my story. As some of you might know, I experienced my first gout attack in, I believe it was 1994. I was 24 years old at the time, walking across campus, and then out of the blue, my ankle started to hurt. It felt like a sprain. It felt like I was playing basketball, and I landed wrong. That night, it swelled up. It turned red. It started to flame, inflamed. It was hot. I didn't know what was going on. Reached out to my dad, and he was like, Gary, I think you might have gout. I have gout. I think it runs in the family, and you probably should go to a doctor. And remind you, I'm 24 at the time. And when I went to a doctor, my primary care physician, he's like, young man, you don't have gout. You're way too young. You're just way too young. And I mean, what do you do with that news? You celebrate, right? I was like, yes, I don't have gout. You're wrong, man. I'm good to go. I must have tripped somehow. I don't know, walked too hard. So out of sight, out of mind, as time went on, the pain went away, and I didn't really think about it. Did gout go away? No, because over time, the attacks kept coming back, and that was 1994. And we're going to go ahead and jump 16 years forward. And by that time, I'm now hitting 40. It's 2010. I'm on crutches. I'm using a wheelchair, and my once active, carefree life is now burdened down with pain, unimaginable pain. For those that suffer from gout, that I am not I'm not exaggerating when I say it's the most horrific pain a person can experience, right? Granted, I've never birthed a child, but we have women in our support group who would swear up and down and say that, full out flare, a gout flare, is definitely more painful just because it lasts so much longer, right? And at the end of birth, you get a nice gift. There's no gift in gout. It's just silent suffering.
Right.
So over time, the attacks became more and more frequent. It would last longer and longer, and the intensity was just immense. And then in 2010, I described that as my rock bottom. That is when I just hit the bottom, and I was ready to give up. I didn't know what else to do. No one was giving me answers. The only thing that the doctors and the medical professional would do for me is when an attack would come, they would give me some type of a steroid. They would give me some pain medication, or they just sent me home, that's not an exaggeration too. They just send you home. There's nothing we can do for you. It'll go away. But I've had it. And so I had determined that I was going to do everything it took to figure out what it is that I have. And if it is gout, then I will demand a diagnosis. I will demand something. I'm going to get something. I'm going to get an answer. And that's when I met Chris. I Googled, who treats gout? I had no idea. Found out that they're called rheumatologists, right? And I looked one up, and there's Chris in Austin, Texas. Made an appointment, went to see him. And my God, it was night and day experience. He spent time with me, spoke with me, listened to me, heard my journey. I shared with him my 16 years of trying to get a diagnosis, trying to treat this monster by myself, right? By myself, with over-the-counter medication, with home therapies that my mom would share with me, right? Like, eat more cherries, Gary. In fact, those cherries aren't dark enough. She would say, she's like, I have some dry, dark cherries that are potent, and she would send them to me. And I love, I'd eat them. And did they help? My condition was way too bad. It just didn't help. Anyways, I meet Chris, and he does one thing that no other doctor has done in the 16 years I was seeking help. He does a simple blood test. One simple blood test to determine where my uric acid was at. And when we did that blood test, I was north of 10. And our guess is that I've been at that level for years, right? When I was finally diagnosed by Chris, I was diagnosed with chronic gout, meaning at this point, I was having multiple flares in a year. So at that period, maybe one attack every few months, right? Maybe every 2 months or so, every 3 months. And they would last about a month at a time, right? Way long, very intense, throbbing pain. I remember going, Chris started me out with allopurinol, and many of you have heard these medications before. Allopurinol. I also used Uloric for a time. My condition was so bad. It's because my levels, my uric acid level was so high for so long that my body had created a lot of uric acid crystals around the joint. And so, was the medication working? Yeah, for me, my levels were going down, but they were not going down fast enough. That was a problem. And unless I can get my levels below 6, my body would not be able to start to heal itself, right? To clean house or to dissolve away the uric acid crystals. And at the time, I was also losing hope. I was impatient. And Chris said, Gary, I'm so lucky. I was able to, I have a rheumatologist. Not only does he know his craft, but he's also into clinical trials. My God, And he's like, Gary, I'm part of a clinical trial. It's in phase 3. It's a infusion medication. Many of you would know it now. It's FDA approved now. It's called Krystexxa, but at the time it was not FDA approved. We were in stage 3. I was at my wit's end, and he approached me and said, you might be a good candidate for this. And, I would say that participating in this clinical trial and sharing my journey was a life-changing experience for me. As I went through the journey with the infusion and the clinical trial, it was 9 months of my life, 9 months, 6 hours at a time, once every 2 weeks. So I would go twice a month, 6 hours at a time, and allow them to infuse this medication to my body. I documented my journey during that time with just identifying my feelings, my emotions, my fears, my hopes. I even documented with pictures, and I think pictures will speak 1,000 words. Kimberly, go ahead and show the pictures, and I'll just kind of walk through them real quick. It's just one slide. So you'll see it's split in four. This is the picture that speaks 1,000 words right here. You'll see the top left picture is me with my first treatment, going through this trial, clinical trial for this medication. As you can see, I was sitting in a chair. They put an IV in my arm and, found a vein. And I'm sitting there waiting for the infusion to be connected to my arm and the drip medication to start. And, I would sit there for 6 hours at a time. And that medication, what they were trying to do is with that medication, they wanted to bring the uric acid level down as fast as possible. And for me, that medication was life-changing. After the first infusion, my uric acid went from 10 to virtually undetectable. It shot down to below 1 milligram. It was intense, so much so that my body reacted. And for the first 3 months during the trial, I experienced actually more attacks than I did while just living my life as a chronic gout patient. And I was ready to probably quit. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so painful. I don't know what's going on. I thought I was supposed to get better. I remember reaching out to Chris, and he said, Gary, actually what's going on is right. This is actually very normal. As your body drops in the uric acid with that level, it's a drastic drop, and your body is all of a sudden going through some major changes. And so as it's changing, your body will react. You're going to see some dark days ahead, but the darkness will not last. You're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is very normal. Keep it up, right? And I was like, okay, all right. I got my cheerleader in my corner. I know what's going on. I have proper information to comprehend and make decisions, and I'm moving forward. And so the picture at the bottom right, that is me at rock bottom. That's 2010 when I came to see Chris. I was I was ready to give up. You can see in my face that my face is very puffed up from just years and years of pain meds and long-term steroid use to try and manage my pain, and it ravaged my body, ravaged my organs. I didn't know what to do. Top left, you see again me starting the medication. Top right is a year after the completion of 9 months of treatment. So after 9 months of treatment, my tophi, I had a lot of buildup of uric crystals around my joints and whatnot. My body had dissolved that. I basically was able, the medication was able to allow my body to, like I said, clean house. And I was a new man. I was able to start eating right, going back to the gym, being active, and look at my face from bottom left to top right. It's night and day, pain and agony, joy, happiness. And then bottom right basically is, I'm restored. Quality of life is back. I'm normal. Do I still live with gout? Every day of my life, I still have gout. But I can tell you this, it's managed now, and I've been pain-free, symptom-free, flare-free for 13 years, since 2010. So for me, The clinical trial I went through with Krystexxa was life-changing, and it profoundly impacted my physical and also my emotional well-being.
Thank you, Gary. And so I do want to address some of what Gary had said here about, he had about 9 months of going through this clinical trial and said something like 6 hours or something going through the infusions. Dr. Parker, is that pretty normal that time is a lot longer during the clinical trials? Because I believe that today it's not 9 months, it's not 8
Sure.
hours. Can you
Right.
kind of talk about the difference there between
Sure.
the clinical trial and then what's available today in that
Sure.
process?
Sure. So Gary's story is always so powerful because you get to really understand where he was and where he is now. I couldn't help mentioning that. But in clinical trials, remember, oftentimes the investigators and the doctors are all we're learning how people respond to this medication as we go. And I, just like Gary said, I can give you my experience and my knowledge of everything I know about this medicine leading up to the event or when we have our visit. But we're still learning, and therefore we will slow things down and have people being observed longer when you're in a trial compared to when it's already FDA approved and we're real knowledgeable and we can really go for efficiency, because it's a big investment in time if you're getting an infusion and have to be observed for a while. And to be fair, there's a lot of trials going on, not with IV infusions, but some people are studying pills, and they literally would just hand you a bottle and say take this every day or whatever like that. And so each trial, again, it's investigating different medications, the speed. They're doing labs every time. So if you're studying a pill, you might be doing labs monthly. Gary, of course, was doing them every infusion, meaning every 2 weeks. And that data is interrogated in fantastic detail because we really want to know everything we possibly can.
Can you go over a little bit of today? So we do know that there is the one approved therapy for adults with gout. And how long does that process take now? Is it
Sure.
9 months? Is it?
Sure. So we have pills, and many people in our support group have experience with allopurinol, or as Gary mentioned, Uloric, febuxostat, the name for it. Again, those are pills. And then Gary and other people who have more severe uric acid and gout problems, we have Krystexxa still, still approved to this day. And doctors who know how to use it, it's still given every other week, so that hasn't changed a bit. But we definitely do not have to observe people as long. So my patients, as a rule, will spend a couple hours in the chair too. If for some reason they felt flushy or something like that and wanted to stay longer, they certainly can. And the nurses will give you a lot of TLC along the way. But most people, we've got it pretty streamlined. So it's a couple hours in the chair and then you're done. And in terms of how long it takes to, as Gary was saying, and I say the same thing, clean house, meaning deplete all of those gout crystals. Well, the answer is everybody's different. Some people show up with a lot more than others. And so I tell the doctors when I'm speaking on the subject, use it for as long as you need it. Now, in clinical trials, we always have a very finite endpoint. So that trial is going to be done no matter where you're at when to answer the question. But in what I call real life, meaning in the clinic, you're going to use it as long as needed. The average in the United States, I think the last time I looked at it was right around 11 months actually, to get the house clean. Now, some people are a lot shorter. They might need it only for 3 or 4 or 5 months. Other people show up with a much bigger burden and they have to go, 12, 20, 12, 18. I haven't really heard much in the way of 24, but they use it to what they need. So I just saw a guy in my clinic a couple of days ago, and he was right at about the 11-month mark, 11 to 12 right there. He had made massive improvement. In fact, one big old knob that was on his elbow completely dissolved away. The other one was probably 80% gone. And other places on his body, it looked like he was about that level, like 80% resolution. And so with that in mind, we kind of estimated, oh, he probably need it for another quarter. And then you're done. And we're going to go back to oral therapy to maintain all of that benefit that you just got with the IV therapy. And so naturally, he was super excited about that. And along the way, people feel better and better. Gary mentioned that you might have more flares at the very beginning when we're rapidly depleting things out, but then your body, usually at the 3-month mark, will start going, oh, I see. We don't have to live with high uric acid anymore. And then they start really feeling better. The frequency of flares goes down, the everyday joint pain goes down, and they start going like, I don't want to stop the medication. My life is vastly better. And so, but I tell them, we're not doing this for forever. Okay. I'm glad you want to, things are going great, but this is not forever. And so I help them identify the right endpoint.
That's great. And so I did see a question earlier about the safety of clinical trials. So what is it that you talk to your patients about when it comes, to, maybe a little bit of apprehension about joining a clinical trial? Is this medication safe?
Right. If I was in someone else's shoes, and I always put myself in someone else's shoes, that would probably be the very first thing on my mind is, help me understand the safety of this thing. Now, the good news is by the time it gets to phase 3, where you're really doing a large randomized trial, it's not like we don't know anything about safety. Remember, they had to get through phase 1, they had to get through phase 2. Those are smaller studies, but I generally can intro, here's what we know, and really walk somebody through what things are likely, what things are unlikely, what things appear to be rare at this point. And it doesn't mean we're not looking for anything else. We're still literally cataloging everything along the way. And to that end, I got to say this. It's very interesting that even if there is a placebo being used, the vast majority of patients will tell me, I'm sure I'm on the real thing. And you think, well, why would that be? And the answer is this type of medicine is very different than what we're used to outside of clinical trials, because when you have somebody exquisitely interested in everything that's going on, any little thing, boy, you're getting this, what I call VIP medicine kind of care. And so they'll say, here's our phone number, let us know if anything's going on and stuff like that, because they really want to know. And so most people kind of go like, man, this is really great. I call, I ring, they bring whatever I want, whatever. And if something pops up, they're unexpected, they investigate, right? And so they're like, man, I'm getting really fantastic care, which takes away a lot of apprehension. And if you have apprehension, what I always tell patients is make sure the investigators and the research coordinators know, because they want to help you minimize those concerns as best they can. And I think, most people will kind of go, man, it was an overall good experience.
Yeah. Gary, what about you? When Dr. Parker said, hey, there's this clinical trial, what did you think? What did your family think? How did you guys make this decision to participate in this clinical trial?
Yeah, that's a great question. When Chris first approached me, I really had to taper my expectations and my hopes, right? I'm a hopeful person by nature. It's just naturally how I am. But for 16 years, hope kept me going until there was none left, right? And at that point, I was like, man, I'm gonna put hope in one more, one more option here. We're gonna try this. What if it doesn't work? But at that point, I've been in pain for so long, and I've been lost really for so long trying to figure out an answer that, for me, and I gotta say, each person will be different. You're gonna have to ask the hard questions. Honestly, don't be shy, right? So I wasn't shy with my questions. I asked, like any good a person that's going out and buying something, right? If you're going to buy something, what do? I mean, when I buy electronics, I will put so much time and effort into figuring out the reviews and reading the pros and cons about how this TV works and how this, phone works. You're doing the same thing, right? Beyond that, you're making sure that all the rocks have been turned over. You're looking at everything. So I wasn't shy about asking questions. And then once I got the information, I had to really sit down and make that decision. Is my current care that I'm receiving good enough? Am I satisfied with that? Am I at a point where I can say that I have quality of life and I'm happy where I'm at? Well, for me, it was no, right? No, I'm not. So with this clinical trial, with this new medication, what is it promising to do, right? So I need to understand that. Well, this drip medication that you're going to go on, it's going to drastically reduce uric acid. Well, Chris, how important is that for gout? Oh, Gary, it is vitally important. It's huge, right? It's the one thing that you need to focus on. Where your uric acid is will determine how bad your condition is, right? When you have gout. So with that understanding, I weighed the pros and cons. I'm like, all right, man, we're in phase 3. Let's do it. I mean, there's some risk with anything, but I think for myself, the pros just so outweigh the con, and I went for it. And again, Chris said it good. I mean, I had VIP treatment. Anytime I had a question, I call and I get a response. Anytime I was fearful, I had people addressing my fears, not just, like, hey, yeah, yay, you can do it, and push me away. It was, why are you feeling that way? Okay, I understand your question. Here's the answer. Here's the data, right? How do you feel now? It's kind of like that, right? So we're walking through it systematically. And for me, it was a home run. It was a home run. I gained my life back. Gout still there, but with the clinical trial, I was able to get to a position where I can manage gout so much faster and sooner. And if you were to ask Chris, without the medication, could I manage my gout? He would probably say yes, but it would most likely have taken years instead of months. Right. And at that time, I was 16 years in. I mean, I lost all my 30s looking for an answer. I didn't want to lose my 40s. Jeez. Yeah. Right. So
let me coattail onto something Gary mentioned, because I think the listeners can all hear how this condition, and really any chronic condition that's painful, can really suck the hope out of you. And so when it comes to clinical trials, what I've found, at least as an investigator, is they often give people a lot of hope, because if they've been getting beat down for a long time and have tried what the traditional therapies are, and it's still sucking, for lack of a better term, they need the hope of something completely different. And so my job is to find people who are in that sucky situation and say, hey, why don't we do something completely different and really see if we can get you to where we both want you to go, right? And as soon as, when they hear that, all of a sudden that glimmer of light gets brighter. And so, like, great, tell me more, that type of thing. And that's where then you put the cards on the table, like both Gary and I have talked about.
Yeah. So, I kind of start thinking, this VIP treatment Gary got and all of that. And in my mind, I start thinking, wow, this is going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So how does the insurance work with clinical? Do you need insurance to be in a clinical trial? How does that work?
Right. I'm glad you asked that, because a very important part of the equation. And here's what you need to know. Insurance is not involved. You don't have to have any insurance at all. In fact, the people doing the investigation have money to answer the question, either through a grant, or a pharmaceutical company is paying a lot of money to get the answer as to whether or not this medication is safe and effective. And so when you're seeing these doctors and these investigators and logging in all this data, you're not paying for it. The insurers are not paying for it. It's literally given out of that bucket, if you will. So I like people, again, there it is with hope. A lot of people go, oh man, I'm never going to get great therapy, let alone VIP medicine, because I have very limited financial resources and no medical insurance. And I would say, actually, the opposite is true. If you're in a clinical trial, you're going to get the exact same care that somebody who's got the, platinum insurance galore, because they're outside of that. And it can be a real benefit in that regard.
You is, sorry. So Todd, I see your question, and that's a great question. I am going to get to that in 1 second, but I do want to ask Gary, how did you feel at the end of this clinical trial, seeing that it was approved and that others are going to have access to it, and that you had a part in that?
Yeah.
I was over the moon. I mean, honestly, being part of this clinical trial and being able to share my story and being willing to share my journey, has helped others, but also helped me just as much as others. It's therapy for me. I mean, it's, for so many of those years were dark and so hopeless. And even though I was trying to seek answers, there were no clear places to go and no way to gauge what is, trustworthy information and what is not. And it was so confusing. And to be able to know what I know now about gout and seeing what I went through and reflecting on that, I just feel like I won the lottery. I was lucky enough to met somebody that was part of a clinical trial. He talked to me about it. I accepted. We went through and pushed through the 9 months, came out the other end, and saw light. And not only, saw the light, but experienced a whole transformation, mentally and physically. I mean, that's pretty awesome. And then to be able to give back to people that are suffering with gout is huge too. So I feel pretty blessed. I feel happy that I'm in this situation.
That's great. And Dr. Parker, I want to read you here Todd's question.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing a spur of activity around gout innovations in recent years? I keep an eye on what's new research is out there, and I'm surprised to see how much movement there is. Talking about Lubricon probiotics, continuous UA monitoring. And then the next question is any upcoming trials you're keeping an eye on. So for that last question, we'll hold off on that because I think I can help with that one. But how about the spur in activity and innovation?
Yeah, I have also noticed the same thing, Todd, that gout is definitely getting some increased activity right now. I'm not really sure why that is, because I feel like all of medicine is just expanding, exponentially. So I'm always, of course, happy when it's kind of in my area, if you will. That's kind of the take-home message. I expect it to continue to move exponentially just because that's how medicine's working right now.
So, and Todd, to answer your question about upcoming trials, we're actually really excited to announce that we have a new tab on the Gout Support website. I'm going to click on it here so everyone can see. So this is if you haven't visited this is the Gout Support Group of America website, where we have a little bit more information about the organization and resources, and a little bit more about Gary and Dr. Parker. And we have this new tab right here that we just launched called Research. So this tab actually talks about what we're talking about here today. What is a clinical trial? Why should gout patients participate, and how to get involved? And listed on here are 3 ongoing clinical trials that are currently enrolling for uncontrolled gout. These are some of the partners that we work with here at Gout Support Group of America, and you can find out more information by going to our website and clicking on these links. So clinicaltrials.gov is really one of your main go-to places to see all of the clinical trials that are going on in the US, and I would assume worldwide, probably, Dr. Parker. I'm sure there's studies going on all over there. And so, oh, thank you very much, Todd. This is a very cool fit for this group. We're excited. So please go ahead and check this out. Click on
I gotta
it.
say that we're probably just going to stick with US trials, though.
Stick with US trial. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
'cause, I mean, there are trials going on, as Kimberly mentioned, in other countries. I feel like in Japan, they do a lot of great stuff. Certainly New Zealand does a lot of great stuff, but I mean, most of our members are not there. So
Yes. So definitely check this out, everybody. We're real excited. We'll put it in the chat and put it up on the Facebook page as well. All right, so let's take a look here and see what else we have going on. So Dr. Parker, let's see. Oh, our next question here is, oh, actually, so if you had, Dr. Parker, one piece of advice for somebody who is interested in joining a clinical trial, what would that piece of advice be?
it would be like, look at the website that we just gave you, and we're gonna keep adding to that as we find out about other ongoing trials, because again, there's stuff going on, as even Todd mentioned. And what I tell people to do is investigate as a fact-finding mission, because you're not saying you have to do anything. So it's not like it shouldn't give you anxiety just to sniff it out a little bit and kind of try to understand. While you're doing that, let me also give a little pearl that a lot of people don't know, and that is sometimes the trial allows you to literally not get rich, but literally pay you to be involved. So what that looks like is, if somebody, a particular trial requires a lot of lab draws, they might say, oh, for every test tube, you're going to get X amount of dollars or something like that. And so it's always worth asking, like, are there any financial parts of this thing? Again, you're not going to have to pay for anything in clinical trials. I've never, ever heard that, but sometimes there's money in there. Or if you have to travel quite a ways away to be evaluated, a lot of times they'll let you expense that, and the investigator team would pay for it. So, just show up, fact find, ask questions. If there's some financial limitations in getting there, something like that, just ask them, like, hey, can I get help getting here? I'm 4 hours away from you, or that kind of thing. And you'd be surprised at what's available.
Great. So I will say to everybody, please feel free to put any questions in the either Facebook live chat or the Zoom chat. And it doesn't have to be about clinical trials. We do open this up for any questions. I do see a couple coming through. So please feel free to ask anything in there. And then Gary, I'm going to ask you the same question, is if you had a piece of advice for anyone thinking about enrolling in clinical trials, what would that piece of advice be?
So I would say regarding clinical trials, don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid, because it's all voluntary. You can stop anytime you want. You can say no anytime you want. You can say, hey, back off. I need 6 feet, from me, get away from me. You can do all that. It's you're in control. You're in control. Ask the questions. Don't be shy. And another piece of advice I would say is, don't journey alone in this, like, you don't need to be alone. That's why we created the Gout Support Group of America, so that we don't have to be alone. And we have 15,000 members now, you guys. And a lot of them have gone through some clinical trials or some medication, or have experiences that you might not have, but if you seek them out, the information is very valuable. Talk with your family members, your loved ones. They can all give you a balance, right? give you some feedback, and they truly want the best for you.
Mhm.
And ultimately, it's up to you to investigate, and you know yourself best, and you know what you've been through, you know how much you can handle, and you know if you want to move forward and try it. So,
Mhm.
and for me, it was a home run. So,
It's great. We love hearing that.
Mhm.
Dr. Parker, I'm actually going to go and ask you this question that came in from our Facebook Live from Lisa. She asks, what do you recommend about allopurinol raising liver enzymes?
Well, I'll start by saying when I'm initiating allopurinol for the first time, I do share with patients that about 3% of people can have that very thing happen. And so that means 97% don't. But if you're in that 3%, I don't try to, I mean, I just switch it out, is what I tell my patients. And so when I'm checking uric acid levels when I initiate therapy and adjusting the dosage to achieve the outcome that we want, if you're in that 3% or so where the liver functions go up, I tell them and they go, hey, listen, looks like, all your medicines are processed in the liver. It's kind of a big filter as I look at it. And if your liver just doesn't like that one, we got to switch it out. And so then I stop it and swap to an alternative again. And the beautiful thing about CNA specialist is a lot of times we know, we have more tools in the toolbox, I'll say, than perhaps a primary provider who's just knowledgeable with the most traditional agents. And so that's the short answer, I guess.
Yeah. Gary, another question for you. Are you still taking medication for your gout even after participating in the clinical trial?
oh, yes. So I appreciate that question. And we get that often in our group. The answer is yes. I'm a lifer, right? When it comes to gout. So it loves me. I love it. And we've embraced one another and we've come to terms, right? But gout will never manage my life. I will manage gout. And how I do that is through the tools that are given to me. And for myself, that would be allopurinol.
Mhm.
So I take religiously every day 450 milligrams, and that's my dosage. Others might take 300. I don't know. Everyone's different, right? With your body weight and whatnot. So the key thing is to act on data. You're going to have to work with your rheumatologist or your doctor, hopefully a doctor that understands gout, so that they can measure your uric acid level and tweak your dosage accordingly. Some have said in our group, if you're flaring, stop taking your allopurinol and your Uloric. I will say I'm not a doctor, but from my personal experience, I wouldn't stop. And maybe I'll allow Chris to, continue with that thought after I'm done. But basically, I wouldn't stop. If you stop, it's almost like starting all over again, right? I mean, eventually the pain's going to go away. We all know that, even without any proactive management of gout, the pain goes away. It doesn't mean the condition goes away, or it doesn't mean your chronic gout goes away. The attack will come back, right? It'll get worse. How you keep from getting an attack is to make sure your uric acid level is below 6, and I do that through, again, taking my daily maintenance medication religiously.
Yep.
I want to
Dr.
piggyback
Parker.
on that one because people ask me all the time, whether in a trial or not, if it's really affected, do I have to stay on medicines for forever? Right. That's what they're really worried about.
Good.
And so I have a very simple analogy here. I tell people, for people that have gout, they need a little bit of whatever the medicine is, whether it's allopurinol or Uloric or probenecid or whatever we're going to use. And I look at it like, and here's the analogy, I look at it like fluoride. So if you're a fellow earthling, we don't brush our teeth for, just only if we get cavities. That wouldn't make sense, right? We try to prevent that stuff. And it's the same case here. You want to just take a little bit every day, you brush for a couple minutes, AM, PM, done. And that's great at preventing, gingivitis, bad breath, cavities, all kinds of other ailments. And so it's the same case here. Listen, your quality of life is way better if you take your medicine and control the uric acid, or you don't have to. And you get those consequences, just like if you stop brushing, it'll catch up with you. It may not take a week, it might take longer, but I mean, it will catch up with you. It's the same case here. So make the decision yourself.
I love that. Yes.
There's another question, and it kind of goes to what Gary was saying about when he started his clinical trial and got a flare. Is it normal to flare up when you're taking a new medication?
Yeah, so I don't like the word normal. I'm going to change it a little bit. But I'll say it's common. I think that's a much better and more accurate term. So it's common. And the way I explain it to patients is this: our body's like the scientific word is homeostasis, meaning it likes the same temperature, same oxygen level, same sodium level, same everything. And so when I give somebody a medicine, whether it's a pill or an IV or whatever, now things become very different in your body. And so as I'm pulling that uric acid out of your body, it's dissolving away, I'd say, hey, your immune system might see that, and it could trigger flares initially until that new homeostasis is established. And then all of a sudden those flares really taper off, whether it's pill or IV or whatever, right? And so I feel like if I front load somebody's mind with that, so they're prepared, then they kind of go, okay, I'm experiencing that. We have a plan, and I'm going to get to where that's not happening anymore. Exactly. But the short answer is, yeah, it's common. Not a guarantee, but common. You're muted on
not on our Facebook chat, but I think it's a really interesting one, Dr. Parker. So someone had asked, I guess this was a little while ago, but it has a lot of comments on it. And someone is asking, is there something besides ibuprofen, colchicine, or acetaminophen that a doctor can prescribe for immediate relief of gout pain, like Oxy or something? The use course of meds don't seem to be working. How can the pain be so bad you can feel it when you sleep?
Yeah. So they asked about ibuprofen, colchicine, and what was the other?
Acetaminophen. And then if the doctor does something like oxy, I would just oxycodone.
Oh yeah.
Work.
So what I tell people is, because gout is such an inflammatory disorder, I realize it's very painful. And so if you're going to, okay, if I have during a flare, a inflammatory problem and a pain problem, then I've got two problems in my mind. Acetaminophen, Tylenol, is not an anti-inflammatory. It's a pure pain drug, just like oxycodone and hydrocodone and other opioids are all pure pain medicines. But that is not addressing the inflammatory problem at all. So I definitely want to have an anti-inflammatory in there to solve that problem. And I know the downstream benefit of that's going to be diminished pain. So I'll get to that in a minute. I tell people I have 3 different anti-inflammatories in my toolbox. 1, colchicine. For those of you that don't know, it's made from a plant. It's not an NSAID, meaning like Aleve, Advil, Motrin, aspirin. It works completely differently, but definitely anti-inflammatory. And it's been used for more than 1,000 years. The stuff works. The key here, though, is it has to be used early, meaning when it's starting to flare, because once you have a bonfire burning, it's very hard for that medicine to work. So I tell people that one you want to have at home ready to go. Now, number 2 are the anti-inflammatory ones that we all think of and know of: Aleve, Advil, Motrin, aspirin. There's a whole bunch of them. And those are even more anti-inflammatory, which also are anti-pain. So it's a nice fit. Now, people generally they can have a much worse problem than even ibuprofen can fix. And our strongest anti-inflammatory by far are steroids. And what I mean by stronger, I mean the bigger the dose you use, the more anti-inflammatory you get. Now, here's the downside. The bigger the dose you use, the more side effects you get. There's baggage to that stuff. So it's a balance, right? If somebody's got a horrible flare, I whip out a very big dose if I can, and I think they can tolerate it, because I want that thing gone as soon as possible. Now, for the person that asked the question, this was not Todd, this was somebody else. So I do want to cover the opioid part, and that is this. If the doctor who is trying to help control the flare is one that goes, listen, this is a very inflammatory and very painful problem. I'm going to give you whatever anti-inflammatory. And you could, I call it cooking with more than one spice. I could give somebody a pure pain medicine with their anti-inflammatory for synergy. 2 + 2 = 5. It's a beautiful thing. And if that doctor is comfortable using opioids for that brief period of time to cool it off, I have no heartache with it. I realize we're in the opioid pandemic and crisis and all these things, but it has its place. These are FDA approved medicines for a reason. And so if that doctor is comfortable, like, here's your steroids, or here's your colchicine, and here's your hydrocodone or oxycodone or tramadol or codeine, or whatever it is, fine. So hopefully that helps, understand the different tools.
Mhm. So many different tools.
Yeah.
So Todd asked another question here. I might need your help pronouncing one of these words that he had in here, but have you ever heard of gout causing sesamoiditis, Sesamoiditis, which is tendonitis and bone swelling at the ball of a foot?
Yeah.
Curious, as I have 2 ailments in the exact same body part.
So he's referring to, there's these little bones on the bottom of the feet. Think of it almost like a little kneecap, down there on the bottom of the foot. It's a bone, and they move, and they're called sesamoid bones, sesamoids. And so if Todd, unfortunately, has an accumulation of this uric acid in and around that little small area, it could inflame that bone and that, the tendon and all the soft tissues in the area. And it brings up an important point. Those gout crystals can be anywhere where there's blood. It's not just bones and joints and tendons. I mean, you could put these things in your kidney. You can put them in your liver. I've got a picture of somebody has it in the eye. No joke. I got it in the, I've got pictures in the prostate. I got it in the heart, right? And so they can go anywhere. And that's one of the reasons why when I'm out speaking to other doctors, I try to get them to elevate this to a bigger priority, because they're like, well, it's painful, but it's not going to kill anybody. I go, oh, really? Put it in your heart vessels and see what happens. So it's important to kind of give this thing the priority that it's due.
Mhm. So another question we have here is, should I consider increasing allopurinol dose if I still feel a little tinkling, although no flare? Also, has there been reports of a connection of muscle cramps with UA levels?
Do the first one. When I am adjusting somebody's dose, I'm really looking for 2 variables here. One, what they're feeling, and 2, as Gary mentioned earlier, so I'm reinforcing, their uric acid level. So those 2 things are not necessarily in parallel, going together equally at the same time. Just like we talked about earlier at the beginning, things could be very bumpy and you think, oh my God, my uric acid must be astronomically high. And I go, actually, it's very low. So you really need to get both data points. And then if I'm cruising along and I see the uric acid level is right where I want it in the target area, then I tell the patient, that activity that you're feeling is not because the uric acid's high. Don't adjust your medicine. It's right where I want it. I'm treating pain and inflammation if they're experiencing trouble. Whereas if I check their level and it's not where I want it, meaning it's still too high, it needs adjustment, then I tell them, I agree with you. That activity that you're detecting here is trying to tell us something. In your case, right now, is trying to tell us we still need to make some adjustments. So 2 things are important: the story, the exam, and all that, and the lab. You can't skip the lab. We get this all the time in the Facebook group, because they think, oh, I'm not flaring, it must be great. All this diet that I'm doing, I'm not drinking Coke anymore. I got a little water in here, coffee. It's not vodka. I'm not drinking vodka, by the way. It's a joke. And so they think, oh, that's the clear sign. I go, no, you don't know nothing about how good you're doing unless you have that other variable.
Yeah. And then something about the muscle cramps. Have there been any?
Yeah. So I would say that 2 things. would muscle cramps be a common complication of high uric acid? Again, it's hard to say if is it normal, and so I'm going to be as specific as I can be. That would not be common to have uric acid causing cramps, if you will. But if you said, well, doc, didn't you tell me earlier that it could get anywhere? Wouldn't that include muscle? And if your muscles were sick, could they cramp? Absolutely. I'm just telling you about that. That would be an uncommon scenario, at least in my 22 or 3 years or whatever it is that I've been doing this. I would say that has not been a common problem for me. So when somebody is experiencing cramps, what do I do? If they also have gout, I look at their medicine list, I look at their other labs, and I try to understand, do I think something else that's more common is causing cramps? And I address that, and I tell people, listen, it's like a dog having ticks and fleas. Some dogs do, in fact, have more than one thing. And the way to make that dog feel better and stop scratching is to fix both, right? You need tick medicine and flea medicine sometimes. And that generally people will understand that. Go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let's make sure I don't have some of the reason for cramps if you don't think it's that.
And then, so just to follow up here, Todd asked a question, would a CT scan be able to ID the crystals in the sesamoid?
Yeah, the answer is maybe. Depends on how much is there. Now, remember, these crystals are microscopic. You cannot see with the naked eye each individual crystal. And so CT scans, and there's software that we can tell the CT scanner to make the uric acid look bright. And the usual way they do it is make it green. It's not that they're green crystals, they're not. They're just, the software just makes it green. But there has to be enough in that little area to detect it and then make it green. So it may or may not pick it up, but it's non-invasive. So if you go, well, I'd like to give it a try if I need confidence, and if you did that and you're working with your doctor, the study is called a dual energy CT scan, dual energy, because it's using the software to pick up differences in crystals.
Okay.
Let me ask a quick question, Chris. Have you heard of the DEX scan?
That is the DEX scan.
Oh, so that is the DEX scan.
It
Gotcha.
stands for DECT, stands for DECT. So dual energy is the E, and then CT is CAT scan.
Perfect. Yep.
Well, it's, C stands for computed and T stands for tomography. We all just call it CAT scan.
All right. So we're a little bit over time. I know we started a little bit late, so I think we're kind of looking good here. Before I give it back to Dr. Parker and Gary for last words, I just want to remind everybody of the resources that we have. First is the website, goutsupportgroup.org. We'll put it in the chat here. We have the new resource or the new research page on there for you all to check out. In addition, we have a lot of new resources coming out. Earlier this month, we released the gout appointment checklist. So just questions that you want to be prepared with when you go to see your doctor, and questions that you want to ask your doctor if you think that you have gout, if you're going through a gout flare. Just a nice little a checklist for you, so you don't have to, have that anxiety of, oh, am I going to remember to ask this, that sort of thing. Gary also released a blog earlier this week with his experience on clinical trials, and there is going to be one coming from Dr. Parker soon on his experience working on clinical trials. Additionally, we do have a newsletter. So if you go to our website and enter your email address, you will be the first to know about some of the new resources that we have available, and when we make any updates to the research page. We are also going to be doing a uric acid test giveaway. So if you register for the newsletter, if you put your email address in the website between now and at the end of next week, we will choose a winner to get a free uric acid test. The newsletter you get about every 2 months. We don't spam you. We don't sell your email address or anything like that. You just get an email about maybe once or twice a month, if that, with some updates, and also, like I said, to be the first in the know about new resources that are coming out. And as always, please do not hesitate in reaching out to Dr. Parker, Gary, or myself via email or through the Facebook group if you have any questions, or if there's a resource that you all think, hey, this would really, really help me and my journey, anything like that, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. So with that, I'll turn it to Dr. Parker first for any last words, and then Gary.
Well, I will just reiterate, since we're talking about clinical trials today, I totally understand why they could give you some anxiousness because it's not FDA approved therapy yet, but just think fact-finding mission. And one thing that I didn't mention that Gary really did, which I think is really valuable, is even if you decide to enroll and you're going through, it doesn't mean you're locked into it and you couldn't leave. You could leave, and people do leave. So, consider that, and hopefully that'll minimize some of your anxieties.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in there. Last words. First off, awesome session. Thank you guys. And I am excited as we're focusing on clinical trials. I think it's needed. I think it's one more tool in the toolbox, Chris, that people can use,
Right.
the more tools, the better. I'm gonna leave it with this, you guys. You've heard me say it before, and I'm gonna say it again. It's you. Do not manage gout. It's gonna manage you. Don't let fear dictate your life. Hope is here. This thing is manageable. Living with gout and having a flare-free quality life is absolutely 100% possible. I mean, I can't make it more clear than that. So thank you guys for joining us.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.